More than 160 people have died in two powerful earthquakes that struck northern Venezuela. The quakes hit less than a minute apart and close to each other, around 30 kilometres northwest of the city of Valencia. The death toll is expected to rise, and nearly 1,000 people are now known to have been injured, while many more are still trapped in the rubble of collapsed buildings.
Panic and fear as buildings collapse on the outskirts of Venezuela's capital, Caracas. This man is live streaming as he yells for his mother. There were similar scenes at Simón Bolívar International Airport as chunks of concrete and ceiling tiles fell onto the terminal floor.
Observen cómo quedó el aeropuerto Maiquetía estando nosotros acá adentro. Mira, el desastre que hay. Acabado totalmente.
A disaster, totally destroyed, says this man as he films inside the airport. At around 6 p.m. local time on Wednesday, Venezuela was hit by two powerful earthquakes just seconds apart. The first, a magnitude 7.2 quake, hit Morón, about 170 kilometers west of Caracas. It was followed by a stronger 7.5 earthquake, as well as at least 30 aftershocks. Crowds cheer as an injured man is pulled from the rubble of a collapsed building in Caracas. Rescue teams worked through the night looking for survivors. Authorities warn the number of dead could rise into the hundreds, perhaps even thousands. Some of the worst damage appears concentrated in the nearby port city of La Guaira. This man is searching for his son, armed with only a flashlight. Rescue teams there say they need more help from the government.
It's very sad, very sad. It's critical because the necessary machinery and human resources are lacking. People need to come.
He then starts counting the number of collapsed buildings surrounding him. The government says help is on the way.
We're now declaring a state of emergency, as provided for in our Constitution. I want to thank the governments of the world that immediately after these earthquakes occurred, contacted Venezuela to offer solidarity and support.
In her late-night televised address to the nation, Delcy Rodriguez thanked those nations, including the United States, Dominican Republic, Mexico, and Qatar, for sending aid to help Venezuela as it deals with its most powerful earthquake in more than a century.
Lois Pace is Regional Director for the Americas at the world's largest humanitarian network, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. She joins us from Panama City. Welcome to DW. Thanks for sparing the time. What are you hearing from your colleagues on the ground?
Well, thank you for having me back, especially under these circumstances. Unfortunately, we're hearing in the immediate aftermath of this great tragedy just a lot of devastation. We were in touch with our team immediately after the first wave hit about 20 hours ago, and have just continued to hear from our staff and volunteers that as they're getting into these communities and seeing the destruction, it's pretty massive, with buildings toppled, with a ton of rubble, presumably many people under those piles of cement, and our volunteers working alongside government authorities to try and clear that. It's really a search and rescue operation 24/7.
And what are the biggest obstacles they're facing?
There's the devastation, of course, and just really understanding where the need is and how to urgently meet those needs. It's covering a pretty wide area. I think you've probably heard of the communities affected. There's the greater Caracas region around the capital. There's La Guaira, which is on the coast. It's a real obstacle to have something like an airport shut down, an international airport, where ideally we could receive supplies and staff and the like. And so those are some of the challenges. Also, there's just a ton of anxiety in the community. You can imagine these citizens, they've been out of their homes all night. People who have been dealing with wave after wave of aftershock after aftershock. It is not great for one's mental health, let alone just the security they feel or insecurity people are feeling in this moment is really, really tough. So we're trying to reach them with mental health support just as much as anything else.
Right, and if your colleagues are in country when this happens, then I guess they're as much likely to be caught up in it as anyone else.
That's absolutely right. Unfortunately, that was, I really admire my colleagues. We had this check-in call a couple of hours at, once the telecoms were more stable, and we had our head of delegation there giving an update. Hey, the team is safe, and we're outside. And at the end of the call, he said, "Well, my apartment collapsed," and he just, he didn't lead with that, right?
Right.
But it's really something to consider. These people, I think he grabbed his phone, he grabbed his red vest, and he said, I'm gonna help however I can. I'm okay, so I can do more to make sure others are okay. And that's what our volunteers are out there doing.
I guess it's important also to remember that Venezuela's economy was in crisis even before this disaster. This must only compound things.
Oh my gosh, certainly, yes. We were already managing sort of slow motion emergencies in the country, whether it's, with a number of people returning to the country, a number of migrants coming back home, if you will, sometimes after being away for decades, but not necessarily having a place to land, whether it's, you have weather events, right? Whether it's rains or we're looking at droughts, forthcoming droughts, this El Nino season. So there's a lot to manage, in addition to, as you mentioned, some of the other challenges the country's facing. So this is not an easy time for Venezuela. I think everyone knows that, which is why we're hearing and seeing the outpouring of support and concern, and which is why we're mobilizing as a movement to ensure this country and its citizens really have what they need in this moment.
And so how does a poor country, a country that was struggling economically, how does it get up off its knees from this and then from there get back to a position that was better than it was before disaster struck like this? It sounds like a massive, massive challenge.
It's a huge challenge, and it's a real blow. Venezuela didn't need this. It was, I was just there actually about a month ago, and I was so heartened by where it felt like the country was and could go. A lot of things are changing, as we all know, and I think for us as a Red Cross movement, we're just most focused on being able to do the most good for the most people, and we were finding ourselves in positions to better do that. And I think now it's just heartbreaking to feel as though people are going to backslide and suffer even more and require our resources and services even more than they did already. But I will say this. I will say that what also came through in my visit was the sheer resilience of Venezuelans. And I know we talk about resilience a lot. I think I talked about resilience on this program before, and it can't be undersold. People shouldn't have to rely on that resilience, but they are digging deeply.
Thank you so much for joining us. We wish you well with your efforts, Lois. Lois Pace from the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. Christopher Sabatini is Director of the Latin America Programme at the Chatham House International Affairs think tank. Welcome to the day. How prepared is Venezuela to deal with a disaster on this scale?
It's not. Let's imagine this as a natural disaster piled on top of a human disaster. And there are a number of reasons for that. First is after 27, 28 years of one-party government, the country has failed to invest in infrastructure, failed in upkeep, completely degraded its entire main source of revenue, oil production. From 2013 until just a few years ago, the economy had contracted by 75%. And then as a result of declining fiscal revenue, corruption, basically it also failed to invest in infrastructure. So you have just weak, even collapsed infrastructure, including roads and bridges, as well as hospitals and the electrical grid. So what you're dealing with here, and I suspect even some of these tragic cases we're looking at right now of collapsed houses, are also the result of bad investment in terms of upkeep, enforcement and regulations on housing, that is really coming to haunt Venezuela. But now, of course, it's confronting the future, and it will continue to struggle with those challenges.
Shortly after the quake, US President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social saying that the US stands ready, willing and able to help. Is that the expected assurance of a big regional neighbour, or is the United States now assuming some greater responsibility for the country since removing its leader?
It's a promise by Donald Trump because, frankly, after the extraction of former President Nicolas Maduro and his wife on January 3rd, he had moved up to the position of interim president, the Vice President Delcy Rodriguez, and since then he's been talking her up as a great partner, really stabilizing and doing great things in Venezuela. He talks about Venezuela as a success story, wanted to recreate the Venezuela model as he tried without any success in Iran. So he has to sort of support this government in its rebuilding efforts. The problem first is that he also, about a year ago, basically abolished the U.S. Agency for International Development, the agency that would have been providing first humanitarian assistance. It had first responders, it had ready pallets of food and potable water, would have been there in within 24 hours, probably less. That no longer exists. So now he has to scramble to pull together other responses and coordinate some meaningful response. We're hearing that the U.S. Southern Command has sent a hospital ship to the coast of Venezuela, but this is not the way that U.S. is typically led in these humanitarian disasters, not just in its own hemisphere, but around the world, whether it's a tsunami in Thailand or flooding and hurricanes in Bangladesh. It simply doesn't have that tool in its box anymore. So Donald Trump is going to have to respond. The question is through what channels will he respond? Will he only provide money? You also still have U.S. sanctions still on some segments of the Venezuelan economy. Those will likely have to be lifted. But also now, without the resources of bilateral development assistance, he's also going to need to try to rely on the private sector to invest in infrastructure development and other economic opportunities to get the economy and the country back on its feet.
OK, I'm going to play you a clip now of Donald Trump at a rally in Pennsylvania this week, and then we'll talk some more.
And we've paid for the cost of the war. Where do you hear this? 28 times already. More, but 28 times. So the cost of the war, we've already, because we brought millions of barrels of oil out, and we're getting along great. The people running it, they're our people, they're great people. And the people are happy in the country. They have smiles, they were miserable, they were starving, but they have a lot of oil.
Christopher Sabatini from Chatham House. Donald Trump there referring to the US abduction of Nicolas Maduro as a war. How much do his claims about life in Venezuela before these quakes reflect reality?
Very little. First of all, it would be an odd metric to say that a country is doing well because people have smiles on their faces. But that aside, the truth is that many Venezuelans, a vast majority, applauded the removal of Nicolas Maduro. He had basically maintained himself in power through repression, electoral theft. The economy had contracted by 75%. Since 2013. So there was a certain celebration and there were some openings. But the problem is most, and Donald Trump says this himself, most of the focus in rebuilding the country was on the oil and gas sector. Now, oil and gas sector, first of all, needed to be rebuilt. Most of the investment that's going in is foreign investment, mostly in pre-existing fields. So yes, oil production has increased, not at the levels that he's saying, but it has increased. But the U.S. keeps that money in an offshore account, and then it's redistributed to the Venezuelan government through the U.S. accounting firm, KPMG. But also, the oil economy is not all that vibrant or does not basically provide general prosperity and economic growth. There are huge problems in the Venezuelan economy and in the rule of law system, commercial law, arbitration, all these things that were not on Donald Trump's sort of agenda to try to work with the Delcy Rodriguez, the interim government, to improve. So it was only focused on oil and mining. And again, those are not, if you will, segments of a modern economy that generate the employment. They may generate revenue, but they're not generating enough. And the truth is many people, we already started to see this. We're feeling disaffected. People were protesting for higher wages. This is only going to increase that.
OK, and so how much then does this natural disaster derail the Trump administration's Venezuela strategy?
Well, if Donald Trump has his way, as little as possible. He's really doubled down on Venezuela. He cited it when he launched his attacks on Iran as the Venezuela model is a successful one. And because of that, he needed to keep Delcy Rodriguez in power. He needed to pretend that everything was going well. But we have to remember, the government that he was trying to remove by removing Nicolas Maduro remained in place. The security apparatus, the corrupt business dealings, all of those things remained unchanged. He simply decapitated the head of the government, figuratively speaking, and replaced him with that president's vice president. So nothing has changed here. But he needs to maintain this aura of success. And that means, oddly enough, that Delcy Rodriguez has a lot of leverage over the U.S. president. He cannot, and he won't be willing to sort of engage in the hard sorts of negotiations and pressure that would be necessary to create, if you will, independent judicial systems and laws, efficient judicial systems and the administration of justice, as well as the sort of accountability and transparency that this government of Delcy Rodriguez and her predecessors has spent 20 years consolidating their power over, gutting the state, undermining institutions. Donald Trump right now is fully complicit in that process because he's refused to put any sort of pressure on this government because he realizes that this is his partner. And doing so could actually result in some temporary, but largely necessary, if you will, sort of upheaval that he simply can't tolerate.
Thank you for guiding us through that. A fascinating analysis. Christopher Sabatini from Chatham House, thank you.
Thank you.